Hello, my name is Dr. Craig Goodman. I'm a clinical psychologist and neuropsychologist and brain researcher. I'm here today to discuss with you certain facts that affect how we live and how we think and the impact that our thoughts have on our well-being and our mental health. Now, there are many forms of therapy that exist today. There's psychotherapy, cognitive therapy, coaching, even a recent field of mindfulness that people are having to be told to pay attention to the stimuli and the environment around them, just to take notice of life. It's almost ironic. Uh, all these fields are very helpful, and they have elements of therapeutic value, but really the most important therapist of all is ourselves and the way we think of ourselves. Now, cognitive therapy is probably one of the most effective of the modern therapies, and it's not by accident that the HMOs and the medical insurances only will give a reimbursement in terms of health insurance for cognitive therapy as opposed to psychoanalysis or psychotherapy. Why? Because cognitive therapy, according to science and scientific journals, is the only one of the few methods as opposed to psychotherapy that they can actually evaluate statistically and scientifically that it has therapeutic effects, that it's actually helped that person, that after a certain amount of sessions and learning cognitive tools and changing your way of thinking, they actually were happier, whether it's being answering on questionnaires and psychological scales of life satisfaction, of happiness scales, and so on and so forth. Just the development of these scales is a science in itself, and it has to be replicated. It has to be proven that it's reliable, the scale, what it's intending to measure, that it's not biased, that it's representative of the larger population. There's many elements that go into that. The biggest revolution, I think, was around the 1950s and 60s when Dr. Aaron Beck, created or started to conceptualize cognitive therapy. And cognitive, for anyone who doesn't know this term, it means thoughts or thinking. Cognition is thinking, what the brain does, how it formulates thoughts, how it uses rationale, how it makes decisions. And that includes memory, because we only think about something or have thoughts or put together thoughts and conclusions based on previously learned things that we've experienced during our lives. Now, what's amazing about cognitive therapy is the neuroscientists discovered many years actually after Aaron Beck had started and formulated this form of therapy, that the brain, although there are many different functions of the brain in different areas, each area is in charge or controls a certain type of functioning, whether it be motoric, motor functioning, vision, hearing, smell, or what we call olfactory processing, memory, and emotions. Now, what's interesting about emotions is emotions exist in the center of the brain, and that system that regulates and produces and manufactures emotions, whether it be happy, sad, angry, fear, is called the limbic system. The limbic system is made up of several components in the brain, but the key component, the key part of this system is called the amygdala. It's a small little circular jewel type thing in the brain about the size of a fingernail, my fingernail. It's that big. And that is in control and creates all our emotions. That's the source of all our problems. Now, what scientists or neuroscientists discovered was any time that we experience something in life, any type of what we call stimulus, someone says something to us, we hear something, we see something, we smell something, we taste something, anything, the part of our brain that is triggered or activated first is the emotional center, the limbic system, and the amygdala. And that center is activated twice as fast as the frontal lobes, which is in control of cognition, of thoughts. Okay? So that means that everyone is hardwired from birth to actually feel before they think. So that means that I am predetermined, or I have a pre-existing tendency to respond to everything that happens to me in life emotionally and not by thinking about why I'm feeling that emotion. Now, this is kind of a paradox in itself because, well, how can we feel something if we don't think about it? If we don't process what it is. But it's a very complex theory of interconnections in the brain. And in fact, we, by thinking, create neural networks in our brain, and our neural networks, kind of like a telephone system between the different areas of our brain, they can be rewired or they can be altered by our thinking. When we think, we actually create this network of neurons that are passing information both through chemical and electrical processes, through electrical conduction, and then through chemical release of neurotransmitters. Transmitters are these little chemicals that are messengers in our brain, like dopamine and serotonin and acetylcholine, that pass from one neuron to the other. No neurons touch one another. There's a space between them, and they release that chemical, and that neurotransmitter passes it to the next neuron, and the next one, and the next one, like a telephone network. And hence, also, we know that emotions are completely controlled by our neurotransmitters as well. The more serotonin and the more dopamine, which are directly related to our emotions, are produced in response to our thinking. So, and we feel, the more we produce these feel-good chemicals, these serotonin chemicals, we feel better, we feel happier, we have more of a tendency to have a positive emotion or a feeling of well-being. That's why people will drink alcohol or take drugs, because those things also cause the brain to produce more serotonin. And hence people feel euphoric, or they feel happy, or they feel released or liberated. It can also, it basically enhances our emotions. Like someone can be more, break into fits of laughter during gestation of a certain type of drug. Or in alcohol, certain people, when they drink alcohol, because of the raised levels of serotonin, they become very silly and laughing and goofy and not in control. Or the opposite, certain other people who have different actual genetic makeups and brain chemistry react to alcohol negatively. They become depressed. They become sad. They become, oh, my life is worth nothing, blah, blah, blah. It's funny that people are affected in different ways. Some people, when they would ingest a certain type of alternate or substance that creates an alternate state of reality, certain people will even be put to sleep by it. It knocks them out. It's too much for their body chemistry to take. But what we're trying to say here is that all these chemicals in our brain are really having an impact on what we feel and what we think. And if we feel a certain way enough times, then it will also affect and impact our thinking. If all the time I feel frustrated and I feel that I can never succeed and I'm always failing and I'm always feeling fear, I eventually will learn that I'm no good or I'm just destined for failure, and I'll start to think that way. And then it becomes what we call self-fulfilling prophecy. Excuse me. The more we think that way, the more we produce those type of chemicals and that type of neural network that sets up a pathways in our brains that actually recycle the same thoughts habitually. I'm no good, I'm no good, I'm no good. Just in the reverse, we can do the same thing. We can say, okay, you know what? That's bad thinking. That's what a cognitive psychologist will do. They'll say, look, you've got this terrible habit of thinking. You've got what we call maladaptive thoughts. Your thoughts are negative, and we need to switch them to positive. Okay, so instead of saying, which you've become habitually kind of almost automatically, what we call automatic thoughts, saying to yourself, even not verbally, but just internally, thinking, I'm no good, I'm a failure, I'll never succeed. Whereas the opposite, you can completely switch those thoughts to positive and say, yes, I'm great, I'm powerful, or I'm smart, or I'm successful, or I can do it, or I can make it, or I'm worth something. And you can start to reprogram your brain to think in a positive way. And then you rewire and you create this neural network in your brain that will coordinate and will support and will recycle positive thoughts. And those will become habitual. Those will become automatic. So automatically, even if I fail or even if something doesn't go right in my life, I won't jump to that feeling of that I previously felt, that I'm a failure because of those thoughts. I'll feel, hey, you know what? Hey, I'll learn from this mistake. I'm going to brush myself off, get up, and do it again and succeed this time. It's no problem. You have to fail to succeed. You know, it's or I did a mistake. It's not that I'm bad. The thing that I did was not so good, or the thing that I did wasn't correct or positive or conducive to my success. So I'll try to learn from that mistake and avoid it in the future. Only a fool continues to make the same mistakes again and again and again and doesn't learn from them. So we all have the capacity to learn. That's what makes us different from animals. Animals don't have conscious thought. They don't think about why they did something. A wolf doesn't check his conscious whether he feels guilty or not if he's going to go and eat the bunny. He will just go and instinctively, as a predator, attack and eat that bunny because he needs it to survive. And that's how his brain, or how the brain of that wolf is hardwired and genetically programmed to find food. Okay? I mean, obviously, we are not like that. We don't go into the supermarket and just grab food and start eating it. We put it into our shopping cart. We stand in line politely. We make sure we wait our turn. We put our items on the checkout stand. The cashier then tells us the total amount. We pay for the items. We take them, put them in bags. We take them home. We cook them, or we don't cook them. We open up the packaging. We eat them. We throw away the packaging. It's a whole process. So obviously our habits of eating, or our technique of just simply eating, is much different than an animal. So that's that whole point. But going back to what I originally said in terms of cognitive psychology, that when everything really counts on our planning and goal making and thinking and memories are all basically part of the frontal lobe. And they're interconnected reciprocally with our emotional center, our limbic system. But we're kind of at a disadvantage that we're pre-programmed to respond through emotion, or we feel before we think. I mean, we're talking about milliseconds. There's 1,000 milliseconds within 1 second. And we're talking about within, I mean, 3 to 5 milliseconds or even less. The way that the brain works and the nervous system processes information is so fast we can't even comprehend it. I mean, how do we feel? If I get a prick in my finger, how do I know I got a prick? How do I feel that pain? It's not that I feel it here in my finger, I feel it in my brain. My brain translates that as feeling. If there's nerve damage to this area of the finger, which, sometimes people will have in an accident or something, that area of the finger was damaged, for example. If you prick, you can prick it as much as you want. They won't feel a thing. They'll say, hey, I have no feeling in that finger. And why is that? Because the nerves, the neurons that are there wired through the body that go from the finger all the way up through the spinal cord, up to the brain, through the brain stem, up into the brain, and are processed by the different regions in the brain, that all happens instantaneously. I mean, so fast that just, boom, wow, that hurt. So we're talking about incredible speeds. Also, when we talk about fear response, we know that fear and adrenaline and cortisone is released in the brain something like 326 miles per hour in terms of speed, that the chemicals, the hormones, are released in the brain and spread to the body, which actually causes increased heart rate. It causes rapid breathing because the brain needs more oxygen to function. And this is endless. This goes on and on. I don't want to bore you with the details, the physiological and neurological details. And I'm sure we can discuss that for eternity. The more and more we study about it, neuroscientists keep finding more and more about how the brain actually works. We don't know everything. We don't understand everything. And we don't understand how thoughts really are produced. What are memories? They're chemicals that are encoded in the brain. Little particles and vessels and compartments that are encoded chemically. So those memories are not just recorded on film. There is no film. Our eyes and our brain are like a camera, and they do record things, but we also forget things, we remember things. The whole awareness today of how all these things are processed is growing and changing by the day. Literally, there are hundreds and hundreds of articles submitted every day to various medical journals, neurological journals, psychological journals about how things happen. If you watch the news, you always see some of the more flashy or newsworthy topics that have been discovered. This scientist discovered that mindfulness is healthier for us. That we actually, by being mindful, we have more fulfilled and happy lives. They even said, they did a study I read in Time magazine, where they said that they did a study about people who ride the subway in New York every day, and people who in the morning during that 30-minute subway ride from their home to their work, by shutting off their cell phones and not being, locked in their cell phones or looking at their applications or their WhatsApp or their Facebook or Twitter or whatever, just by shutting off from that matrix, that network, that technology or distraction, and being aware of the people around them, looking around, look at the people sitting in front of you or next to you, listening to the sounds of the subway train, thinking about life, being aware of your existence, being conscious of the moment. They're saying, this is great, this is good for you. Well, we have to be told to be conscious of, we have to be told to think about the moment, apparently so. It's almost it's paradoxical and ironic that this field of mindfulness, which is really true, we're not mindful. We're busy. We're always distracted. We're always looking for distractions. And if we don't have distractions, we'll try to find distractions to distract ourselves from ourselves. Most people don't think about themselves. They're either worrying about work or worrying about the kids or worrying about their friends or worrying about their colleagues or what other people think about them. They're worrying about the president or the prime minister or a war or God knows what. Okay, we're always thinking about things. And it seems like anytime we spend a little bit of time without anything to do, we get bored and we find something to occupy our minds with. What about just sitting and being mindful? That's all they're saying. And it's funny that we're almost forgetting how to do that, especially in the rapid age of developing technology. So now we need therapists and educated PhDs to come and say to us, hey, you people are not being mindful of life. You're not being, you're doing. That's two concepts in psychology we talk about. Constantly doing and doing and doing and being. There's a difference between doing and being. There's some people that they spend their entire lives running around doing, always working or trying to do something or to be active or to be busy. They're busy bees, keeping busy. And the minute that they don't have anything to do, they go nuts. They can't take it. They can't stand it. Or they can't be alone at home with themselves. Or they can't go off and just sit in a park and meditate and be by themselves. It'll drive them crazy. Why? Because suddenly they'll be stuck with themselves. And all those thoughts and all those internal beliefs and that belief system that they have internally will just come out and haunt them or attack them. And they can't, and it's too much to take. Because it's so negative or so neglected, or there's so much baggage in there in my brain that I'm not dealing with, that I'm just trying to run away from, because I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to deal with myself. I don't want to think about myself. You know, some people you'll ask them, what do you feel about yourself? He says, I don't. I try not to. I try to avoid myself at all costs. I don't want to think about it because if I stop and do, I'll just go nuts or I'll cry or I'll really get depressed. So I just try to keep busy. I do my job. I try to be successful, make a living, make everybody happy around me. As long as everything's in balance and there's a homeostasis, then I feel okay. That's why a lot of people, when they come to the age of retirement. I've worked with psychogeriatric therapy for many years. You find that people who were once, deans of universities or CEOs or executives or doctors or people who were very accomplished and seemingly very happy all their lives, suddenly when they go and retire, they're sitting at home with nothing to do. Suddenly they're not that important person that everybody comes to for advice or comes to with respect and recognition. Suddenly they're just a Joe Schmo that wakes up every day and says, what am I going to do today? Has to occupy themselves. And they feel that their lives suddenly lose all meaning. They become depressed. I've treated many people like this. That suddenly they're forced to be themselves. Suddenly they're forced to deal with themselves. They don't have a distraction. So they'll quickly find a hobby. Or they'll quickly find something to do. Maybe it'd be volunteer work. Maybe it'd be to start a new career, even in old age, or even just to keep going back to my old job on a volunteer basis. I won't, you know what? Don't pay me. Just let me come into the office every day. I'll train new employees. Or I'll just let me, just give me something to do. So this is kind of sad. We work all our lives and say, when I get to retirement, I'm going to relax. I'm going to go on vacation. I'm going to start hiking. I'm going to sit on the beach. I'm going to read books. I'm going to enjoy life. But a lot of times when people finally get to that stage in life, they can't enjoy it because they don't enjoy themselves. This is kind of a paradox in itself. So really the bottom line is what we think about ourselves is what we'll feel. And what we feel will determine and influence what we do in life and how we exist, our being, the being, our actual being in life, how we be, how we, are in any given moment, how we feel, what we do, what we experience, how we experience. It's actually goes on to infinity. But what we can do is start and taking this time to be aware, to spend more time getting to know ourselves, which doesn't come naturally. It's actually easier to think and worry about other people as opposed to worrying about ourselves. It's easier to try to find meaning with doing for others as opposed to doing for ourselves, and vice versa. Narcissism is inherent in all of us. There's a difference between positive narcissism and negative narcissism. Someone who has to be loved at all times and has to be the center of attention and needs to be recognized by millions on Instagram or be a famous movie star or famous musician or whatever, or they constantly need attention from other people. And no matter how much attention they get, it's like an endless, bottomless pit. They need more and more. And it's almost like a drug. They become addicted to stardom or addicted to attention. Their endorphins and their serotonin are activated by these, things. Just like every time you get on your phone a message, you're like, oh, who called me, or who sent me a text, or it's triggering things in our brains. It's creating these feel-good chemicals, these serotonin and dopamine neurotransmitters. They're making more, they're creating more. So then we get addicted to that. So we sit on Facebook all day. And there's even recent documented reports about people who are so addicted to Facebook, young teenagers who are actually forced out of school because they cannot stop themselves from texting or looking at their Facebook or whatever in the middle of class, and they're literally thrown out of class because you're not allowed to do that. It's against the rules. You need to be paying attention to the teacher, to the lesson. So they send these people to therapists, and literally in therapy, they're sitting with their phone, and the therapist is trying to get them just to stop using the phone. They're saying, well, wait, hold on a minute. I just need to answer this text, or I need to check this Facebook thing, or whatever. They literally are so addicted to it, they can't live without it. And that's all chemical. That's all learned and habitual. So we need to send these people to, addiction centers. They need to go into detox, okay? They need rehabilitation because they become addicted to it. Just as we have workaholics, people who become addicted to work, or people who become addicted to love. The song I'm Addicted to Love by Robert Palmer. Everything is potentially an addiction. Everything, can be an excess of anything can be damaging or dangerous, even if it's a good thing. Work is considered a good thing. Creativity is considered a good thing. Okay, a glass of wine could be a good thing. In fact, researchers say 1 glass of red wine every day is actually good for the heart. Okay, but if I have 10 glasses of wine, that's not good for me. Then that will cause alcoholism. And the more we drink alcohol, or the more we become addicted to something, we have tolerance in the body. We become tolerant of this, and then we need more and more of that to achieve the same effect. So whereas every night when I came home from work, I drank a glass of wine or a glass of whiskey, it was nice. It made me feel good. It gave me a feeling of euphoria. But the more I do that, then I need 2 glasses, then I need 3 glasses, and 4, and so on and so forth. And then I become tolerant to that type of stimulus or that type of means for achieving an alternate state of reality or alternate mindset, alternate feeling, a way of a chemical balance in my brain. So we need to learn how to keep this balance within ourselves. And it's constantly changing because we are constantly changing. We're not the people we were yesterday. The air we breathe, chemicals, things that we ingested, food, the bacteria, the air that goes in and out of our bodies, the food that goes in and out of our bodies, cells in our bodies die and new cells are created. We're constantly changing. We're flowing like a river. Our bodies are constantly changing, aging. Cells die, cells are born. We're not the same people we were 20 years ago, and we're not the same people we were, 10 hours ago or 20 hours ago. So we have to flow with our own changes. We have to go with the flow, so to speak, and the flow of society around us, the speed of society, the speed of technology. So I can keep going on and on, but for now, let's stop with and conclude this discussion on the fact that we need to slow down, stop, think, and try to be conscious of what's going on around us, in ourselves, to be conscious. In fact, there was a very renowned psychologist by the name of Nathaniel Branden. He's one of the leaders in the self-esteem movement. Self-esteem is another area of psychology which is critical, and I personally feel is very neglected in therapy itself and amongst clinicians. He used to say repeatedly in his books, live consciously. Try to be conscious, more conscious of what you're thinking, why you're thinking what you're thinking, and what kind of feelings are being produced by those thoughts. So let's start with consciousness. Otherwise, it's not going to be as good as it could. Thank you very much, and have a very happy and conscious day.